Welcome to Marketplace Tech Bytes, our weekly review of some of the biggest stories making headlines across the industry. I'm Stephanie Hughes. This week, mass firings expected at federal agency that oversees chips and AI. Privacy rights advocates sue DOGE over Americans' personal data. And Humane to discontinue its AI pin wearable. I'm joined by our regular contributor, Maria Curie from Axios. Hey, Maria.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yep. We're going to start with our bite of the week. This is one number that gives us some context about what's going on in tech. Maria, what's your number?
My bite of the week is $97 billion. That is how much Elon Musk is offering Sam Altman to buy shares of OpenAI. And it's really the latest in this competition between the two tech CEOs in this AI race. And it's coming, as XAI, Elon Musk's company, releases Grok 3, the latest chatbot model for his company. And so we're really seeing this competition heat up.
Yeah. And sticking with AI, but moving to the government world, our first topic today is mass firings expected at a federal agency that oversees chips and AI. So these layoffs in the federal government are continuing, including reportedly at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, which is part of the Commerce Department. This is like a federal laboratory that's been around since 1901. Its mission is to promote U.S. innovation and competitiveness, and part of its work is to help create standards. Maria, you're reporting that about 500 employees in this agency are expecting to lose their jobs. The illustration that accompanied your story were the keyboard keys Control X. For people who aren't familiar, remind us what NIST does.
So NIST really sets the standards for how these technologies, including artificial intelligence, should be deployed on a voluntary basis here within the United States. It tells companies, hey, this is how you should be deploying this technology to make sure it's trustworthy and safe. But it also does it on an international basis. And that's important because if the US isn't setting the standards, that could open up, the possibility of other countries stepping in like an adversary.
Yeah. And so what could these job cuts mean for NIST's work that they do?
So about 500 people are being targeted right now, and that would include more than half of the AI Safety Institute, because more than half are probationary employees. So these are people that are new to the agency. They're the ones that are being targeted. It would also impact the Chips for America offices, the ones focused on research and development, and the ones focused on actually giving out these grants to bring chip manufacturing back to the US. This matters because as the US races to develop this technology, there has to be some sort of government agency involved, making sure that the United States is remaining competitive by building chips here at home, and that there are safety standards being developed.
Yeah. As you say, so this AI Safety Institute is brand new. It's not even 2 years old. What does its gutting, as you call it, mean for the development of AI in the US?
We are really seeing a shift away with the election of President Trump and a Republican sweep of Washington from safety as being at the center of AI development. We're seeing internationally too, like the United Kingdom, for example, has changed its AI Safety Institute name to be AI Security. And this, at the beginning, may have been seen as just a reframing using new language, but we're seeing now with the gutting of this agency that it's more than that. It is getting rid of the actual personnel that are in charge of setting these standards. And so that is the shift away that we're seeing, where safety is not going to be at the center. It's really about promoting innovation and beating China in this competition.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, part of the agency's work is to implement the CHIPS Act. This is the law passed in 2022 to encourage semiconductor manufacturing in the US. What do you think is the future of that initiative with these job cuts?
Well, we have heard, President Trump disparage the Chips and Science Act, consider rolling it. He has said he would consider rolling it back entirely, but this is a very bipartisan law that is benefiting lawmakers in red and blue districts. A lot of companies are benefiting from this law. I think that we can see maybe a shift away from actual grants being given to these companies to tax incentives or using tariffs to, encourage or force these companies to bring production back into the United States. These are more favorite tools of the president versus, giving out that money. But we will see. This is a law on the books that has
Yep.
been passed by Congress. So the future is uncertain.
What's your sense of how people at the agency are feeling?
A lot of anxiety. It's very uncertain what is going to come next. And as we've seen in other agencies, sometimes employees have been let go and then told, never mind, your job is safe. And then in the end, told again, you're actually going to be let go. And so it's moving fast. There are a lot of moving parts and just a lot of anxiety right now among employees.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move to our next story. Privacy right advocates sue DOGE over Americans' personal data. So, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, a digital privacy group, is suing the Office of Personnel Management to keep it from handing over federal employees' personal information to DOGE. They say this violates the Privacy Act of 1974. This is one of several lawsuits from recent days over DOGE's actions. Maria, the Electronic Frontier Foundation points out that the federal government is the nation's largest employer with millions of workers. Tell me about some of this information that could be going to DOGE.
So we're talking about social security numbers, health records, salaries, the information of beneficiaries, these employees' family members. So it's a host of sensitive information. If they're doing work with unions, this is all sensitive personal information that has been handed over without their consent. And that specifically is what violates the Privacy Act. And so this is one instance where we do have a law on the book that gives a basis for a lawsuit.
Yeah, and so let's talk about that a little bit. So it's from 1974. It places limits on what data the federal government can share about U.S. citizens. It was passed right after Watergate and around the time of the resignation of Richard Nixon. So this is from a time when records were more likely to be paper than digital. But it seems like there's a lot riding on this law right now, right?
Yeah, there's a lot riding on this law, and there are still gaps because we do not have a federal privacy law just for any American that is not associated with the federal government. And so, you know, this is also an area where Congress has kind of lagged behind internationally in just passing a federal privacy law. And we are seeing in this Congress that Republicans in the House are really starting from scratch when there are ideas out there to get a law on the books.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to our final story. The startup Humane will discontinue its AI pin. So, this was a wearable that became widely available to the public last spring. Here's a video from the company explaining how it works.
This is the Humane AI Pin. It's a standalone device and software platform built from the ground up for AI. Okay, got my clock, weather, and the date. If I tilt my hand up, got nearby.
So really futuristic. It, however, did get some pretty bad reviews right from the get-go, including from Victoria Song of The Verge. She actually spoke about it on Marketplace Tech last year and pointed out the pin, it had to connect with a server anytime you wanted to ask it a question, which created delays.
So you're waiting 7 seconds. Well, that's impressive when you consider what it's actually doing. But when you consider that your phone is instant, you're not waiting 7 seconds, you're not even waiting a second. That's an eternity.
And Song called this a company with a cool idea that didn't get the timing right. So, Maria, what does the failure of this pin tell you about wearables and our willingness to wear them?
I mean, I think unless something fundamentally, societally takes place where we're no longer as reliant on our phones to do our jobs, to connect with loved ones, to just function in modern society, I think these wearables, unless they can truly match the performance of a phone, I don't think that they have much of a bright future. It's also $700, right? So I don't know how many people we're gonna
That's
put
a
that
nice
money
pin.
into it. Yeah. For the delays. And I think part of the motivation too is to have people not look at their phones so much, but then it's like, are you just going to be looking at your hand? Like, you know, we're wired to be looking at our phones at this point.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, the idea with all these wearables is to like get us away from our screens, but the screen is winning.
Yeah.
Are we just down with screens for the most part? We're used to it.
I think we are very used to it. I mean, I think something would have to happen at a systemic level for us to pull away from it at this point. I do think that HP kind of absorbing the founders of this company and this project and wanting to move toward this technology does tell us that it's not gone forever. I think the timing that's right, that is the problem. But farther down the line, if we could get something as functional as a phone, as a wearable, I could see that picking up steam and less expensive.
Less expensive. That's key.
Yeah. Yes.
And just on that last point, Humane is selling some of its AI capabilities, as you mentioned, to the computer company HP, which is going to have a new innovation lab. What do you think could come of that? Anything interesting?
I mean, we'll see. They're going to be exploring and experimenting. And I think even though this has been, described as largely a flop, I don't think it's the last time that we are seeing this type of technology with these types of investments.
What sort of wearable do you want? What would you put on your body?
I don't even have an Apple Watch. I'm not the market for a wearable, but I'm sure others are.
Do you have a phone? You have a phone.
I do have a phone, can confirm.
That's Maria Curie from Axios. Maria, thanks so much for talking with me.
Thanks.
And thanks to all of you for joining us for Marketplace Tech Bytes Week in Review. Jesus Alvarado produced this episode. I'm Stephanie Hughes. This is APM.